Hi everybody, and welcome to the Depression Files. If you're wondering what the Depression Files are, they are a collection of research topics about depression, anxiety, bipolar depression, also known as manic depression, that will have a mix of researched information and personal experience throughout this entire podcast-esque video. I wanted to start this video off by introducing 3 methods of talking about this topic that I will use. Typically, I stick to 3 main modes of presenting information. I use pathos, which is the use of emotion, ethos, which is the use of an ethical appeal, including citing the individuals who have way more experience than I do on this topic, and logos, which is the use of facts and logic. I will try not to sway too far into each area, but if I do, feel free to call me out. As the video title suggests, we're here to learn more about mental health. For those of you that are not sure what that is, welcome. For those of you who know what that is, feel free to weigh in and have a conversation about it, or expand on anything I talk about in the comments section below. Please note that any YouTube wars are not acceptable, and I just ask that we keep the conversation pleasant as I want to promote a knowledgeable but positive brand. Opinions are not facts. I want to make sure that that is clear. Anything that is my opinion, I will tell you that. To be honest, I think we'd have a much more peaceful society if everybody would remember that. For those of you that are here and are affected by mental health issues, I hope that I leave you with some conversational arsenal to better equip you for some of the questions I'm sure that you have received or might receive when someone when someone asks you about your mental health status. Let's get into the meat of the video. What causes someone to have a mental health disability, a mental illness? If you think that's an odd question, I have to say that I agree with you. But it's one that I have received many times, and honestly, it's a really hard question to answer. Generally, we first have to look at the differences between feeling sad and down because of a difficult situation or event in our life and having an ongoing sense of hopelessness. One is circumstantial and the other is chronic. The circumstantial goes away with time, and how much time depends on the individual. And it does have the ability to morph into a chronic condition if it's not treated properly or the individual does not move on, cope with, whatever the event was that caused the circumstantial mood change. Now, if you're wondering why I said mood change, it's because depression, bipolar, schizoaffective, I'm going to butcher this, clithomia, persistent depressive disorder, which was called chronic depression disorder when I was diagnosed, all fall into the mood disorder category. I'm sure there's more, or maybe the medical world has created new categories. I'm not entirely sure, as I fully expected anxiety or body dysmorphia to be part of the mood category, but it's simply listed as mental health illness. I think I've gone off on a tangent. I digress. So what do these mental illnesses, these mood illnesses, have in common? And I would have to say that the most common answer is mood swings. So what causes mood swings? There have been a lot of studies and theories on this, as well as mental illnesses and mental mood disorders. For example, when I was a kid, it was the, quote, common knowledge that mood disorders were caused by the lack of serotonin or chemical imbalance in the brain. And I even used this as an excuse many times. This was known as the serotonin hypothesis. Joseph, I put his name on there because I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Childkraut? Okay, again, here, you figure that out. But he was the one to introduce this concept in 1965. 1965. Attempts were made in 1996, it took that long, to induce depression in test subjects by lowering their serotonin levels, but this didn't yield the results that would support the serotonin hypothesis. If you'd like to read more about this topic, I have linked the information in the description section below. Now, the authors of this journal, where they're talking about Joseph, that guy, and about his hypothesis, Mr. Lacasse, I believe, and Mr. Leo, they're not saying that serotonin doesn't play a role, because it does. They acknowledge that a drop in serotonin is something that can drop when you have depression. It can drop you, basically, when you have depression. I've heard this terminology and explanation from a young age, and I just wanted to get it out there that it is not entirely accurate. And sadly, even just recently with the psychiatrist, counselor, whatever you want to call them, they brought this up saying that it's a chemical imbalance, it's not your fault, all of that. And I no longer go see them for this, because I know that that's a fallacy and that they're stuck in, 1965. And I'll tell you why that bothers me in just a second. Now, I want you to know I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I enjoy them. I think they're funny. Most of them just make me laugh. So I'm sorry if I sound a little bit like one when I say this, but the reason I brought this serotonin hypothesis up, this chemical imbalance theory up, because it is a theory and an explanation that was primarily used to promote antidepressant drugs in the legal drug market. I'm not knocking any drugs that are out in the market that help people. But the problem is this hypothesis didn't fully explain what a mental health issue is. That's really my main problem with it. According to Harvard Health Publishing, and please note that the article I'm quoting, talking about, does focus on depression, but according to them, it's often said that depression results from a chemical imbalance, but that figure of speech, they called it a figure of speech, doesn't capture how complex the disease is. And notice they called it a disease. The Encyclopedia Britannica defended, I am everywhere right now. It is 10 o'clock at night. Defined the disease as, not the disease, a disease, as any harmful deviation from the normal structural or functional state of an organism, generally associated with certain signs and symptoms and differing in nature from physical injury. They go on to say that a diseased organism commonly exhibits signs or symptoms indicative of its abnormal state. Thus, the normal condition of an organism must be understood, or the organism, in order to recognize the hallmarks of disease. Nevertheless, a sharp demarcation between disease and health is not always apparent. So what does that mean? It means it's not normal, therefore the disease can take many forms. And honestly, this is my opinion, but I think that's why it is so misunderstood, is how many different forms it can take. My depression does not look the same as someone else's clinical depression. Just throwing that out there. Back to the Harvard research. There are many possible causes of depression, and I'm quoting them, including faulty mood regulation by the brain, genetic vulnerability, stressful life events, medications, and medical problems. It's believed that several of these forces interact to bring on depression. To be sure, chemicals are involved in this process, but it is not a simple matter of one chemical being too low and another too high. Rather, many chemicals are involved, working both inside and outside the nerve cells. There are millions, even billions of chemical reactions that make up the dynamic system that is responsible for your mood, perceptions, and how you experience life. So, great explanation, right? The truth of the matter is there's so much that can affect mental health and mental illness. For example, the brain structure. Researchers believe that the misfiring of neurons or neurotransmissions in brains causes the symptoms of depression. For example, and this is another quote, scientists believe that there may be disruptions in the neurotransmitters dopamine, I'm going to butcher this, glutamine, and norepinephrine don't quote me on that pronunciation, in individuals who have schizophrenia. They also go on to talk about this in depression and any other mood disorder. These issues with specific chemicals and neurons in your brain interacting or blocking interactions, along with social and emotional development, nurture factors, your environment, and genetics. Although there is, as far as my research can tell, only proof that bipolar depression and schizophrenia are truly genetic. I'm still looking into this as I personally believe, and again this is just an opinion, that genetics play a huge role in how strong the neurons in your brain are. Again, opinions are not fact, I'm still looking at that. At any rate, let's move on to the actual brain. Scientists still really don't understand the brain in its entire capacity. However, the parts of the brain that carry the neurotransmitters and some of the natural body chemicals that we talked about, if they're altered, it seriously affects someone's mental health. And I am again going to butcher some of these names, but I'm going to try this. Amygdala? Someone's going to laugh at me and correct me. Thalamus and hippocampus all play a part in the study of, I'm getting ahead of myself. In the study of the Journal of Neuroscience, 24 women with depression were studied, and the hippocampus in those individual women were 9 to 13% smaller than in a woman who did not have a history of depression or current depression. So that's something to think about. So what is all this? This was a basic overview of what's happening in the brain of someone with mental illness. There are some things happening that are beyond their control. If you know someone with depression and you didn't understand it, I hope you understand it a lot better now. I hope you read the articles that I linked. I hope you do your own research. In some cases, and I'm sorry if you feel like I'm talking to you or if I'm stepping on your toes, but I hope you stop thinking it's purely emotional. It's hard for someone with a mental illness to battle their inner self. When your brain is giving you a constant wedgie, it sucks. You can't just pick it out of there. And if you're a visual person, I'm so sorry. It genuinely takes hard work to strengthen your own neurotransmitters, and most people don't know that you can do that. Your brain is a muscle, your neurons are the connective tissues of that muscle. You can't give it a workout. It just takes a while and constant maintenance, much like weight loss. You can't stop. So why do more people with mental illnesses not do this? Why don't they do this? And again, it's probably because they don't know that you can do this, and, well, the brain wedgie makes it really hard to want to do it, or even know how to even start, because it's a wedgie, and it hurts. Enough of the wedgies. Wedgies. Kind of stuck on that. Anyway, if you have depression, I hope that I've given you enough fuel to talk to people about it. Now, here's a question I get all the time. What about your life is so bad right now? Ooh, I'll be honest, that question used to trigger me a lot more than it does now. It still does a little bit of triggering, but I've gotten past a lot of that. I used to react with anger, tears, running away, being snotty, telling people off. And what I didn't realize is they had no idea what they were actually asking. I believe in my heart that most people are seeking to understand a disability that they can't see. And again, they're basing their assumptions about depression on it being bad or good, and always having a bad or good emotional reaction. They don't know that it's so much more than that. As soon as I realized that, I mean, I've learned this before, I'm just using more recent studies and quoting them, but as soon as I realized that most people don't get this, that they don't understand this, they don't research this for themselves, they just make assumptions, I was able to have a real conversation with some of those people and leave that anger behind. Let's be honest, who wants anger on top of a brain wedgie? Came back to the wedgie. I know I don't. I'm such a child. So, anyway, if someone asks me this question, I've started answering this question like this. I say, I'm glad that you asked. Here is a common misconception about depression. It's not just about your life or environment, good or bad. It starts in the brain. Let me tell you about neurotransmitters. And then I continue. Sometimes people listen and they're interested. Sometimes they don't. They look at their phones. They look anywhere but you. They are exhibiting those body signs that they're genuinely not interested. And at that point, that's when I just calmly say, okay, thank you for your time. I'm not mean about it. And I get up and I walk away. Pretty much no matter what their protest is, because I clearly don't have their undivided attention. I have the right to be respected, just like they do. So if they're not respecting me, I have the right to pull myself from that situation. As do you. Now, if they follow you, like sometimes people follow me, and insist that you finish or defend themselves, we need to move past that. You know, they're defending themselves right now, because that can also be a trigger. Maybe I'm just a really angry person, but this has triggered me in the past. And generally what I say is, I am more than happy to continue. However, I just need you to respect my courage to talk to you about this. And please, give me your whole undivided attention. I kind of make that motion of them like making eye contact with me, looking at me. If they're not comfortable with eye contact, at least they can look in my direction. And honestly, that's not asking too much of anybody. And if they feel like that's asking too much, you have your own mental health to worry about. Walk away. Okay? Just stand up for yourself. When you start to retrain yourself to have calmer reactions to stuff like this, in general, you're going to feel better. And honestly, it's less stressful for you. And in general, they want to listen to more of what you have to say. And honestly, that's what we want them to do. I mean, I know that's what I want them to do. I want more people to understand and start more conversations about this. And this is the best way that I know how to do it. Well, that was a lot of information. I hope that this is helpful. I hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something, honestly. Remember, my sources are linked into the description below. Please feel free to check them out. Hashtag not sponsored. Although Harvard, if you want to give me enough money for my doctoral degree, sponsor me. That sounded really stupid. At any rate, thank you guys for listening to me, and I will definitely see you in the next video. Stay awesome, and bye-bye!